All right, let's just jump right in with a pretty huge and maybe even a radical idea. What if most of our misery, I'm talking about that deep anxiety, that heavy depression, what if it isn't just an unavoidable part of life? What if it's actually a massive, unnecessary waste of the one shot we get? Let's dig into that.
So let's start right there with that big question. We're all kind of taught that emotional pain is just part of the deal. It's the human condition. It's inevitable. But what if that's not the whole story? What if there's a way to feel appropriate sadness or disappointment without letting it spiral into crippling misery? The source material we're looking at today puts this really bluntly. This kind of suffering is incredibly expensive. It costs us our time, our money, and just needless anguish. It doesn't just sabotage our own joy, it spills over and affects the people around us. When you frame it like that you're literally frittering away your one life supply of potential happiness, it really hits you. What a profound waste. Okay, so if it's a waste, how do we stop it? Well, the answer comes down to this incredibly powerful fundamental principle, one that's actually been around for centuries. You feel the way you think. It's almost never the event itself that makes us miserable. It's our belief about the event. And listen, this is not some new age, trendy idea. We're talking about ancient Stoic philosophers like Epictetus who were teaching this stuff 2,000 years ago. And notice that one little word there, mainly. We mainly feel the way we think. That's so important. It's not saying it's the only factor, but it tells us where our most powerful lever for change is. So fast forward to today, and that ancient wisdom is actually the bedrock of modern science. It's the entire basis for a huge field of psychology called rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT. And the key idea here is that we create our own feelings. We absorb these ways of thinking from our families and our culture, sure, but we also invent our own silly, unhelpful beliefs, a lot of the time without even noticing we're doing. But here is the hopeful part. This is the real game changer. This is what makes us different from every other animal on the planet. We have this superpower. We can think about our own thinking. A dog gets scared and it's just scared, but we humans can feel anxious, and then we can take a step back and ask, wait a minute, why am I feeling anxious? What thought is causing this? That's our ticket. And this leads us to a really, really critical distinction. The goal is not to become a robot and feel nothing. In fact, some negative feelings are healthy. They're appropriate. The key is to learn how to separate that healthy, appropriate pain from unhealthy, self-defeating misery. There is a world of difference between feeling concerned about something and being totally panicked by it. And really, it all boils down to the words you use inside your own head. Healthy concern is all about preference. It sounds like, man, I'd really prefer to do well on this. That helps you take action. But unhealthy panic, that's a rigid demand. It sounds like I absolutely must do well, and it would be a catastrophe if I don't. That one little shift is what creates terror, freezes you up, and ironically often makes you perform worse. And if you're thinking this sounds a little too simple, get this. This isn't just some clever theory. It is backed by a mountain of scientific research. We're talking about more than 250 controlled studies that all point to the same conclusion. The more you cling to these rigid, irrational beliefs, the more emotional problems you report. The science on this is just incredibly clear. So, if the huge gap between healthy concern and unhealthy panic is just the difference between a preference and a demand, what's the actual mechanism? What's the little word, the tiny mental switch that flips us from one to the other and pushes us over the edge into misery? I want you to just think about it for a second. What's the one single word that can take a totally reasonable desire, like I'd like to be accepted by this group, and twist it into a recipe for social anxiety? It's this word, must. It seems so small, so harmless, but this word is a tyrant. It's a bully living in your head. The moment I would like escalates into I must have, you've sprung a trap on yourself. In fact, the psychologist who created REBT, Albert Ellis, he came up with a very memorable and kind of cheeky term for this exact problem. He called it masturbation. Yeah, you heard me right. It's the mental act of taking your perfectly reasonable preferences and desires and inflating them into these absolute, rigid, non-negotiable laws of the universe. It's the tyranny of the shoulds, the oughts, and the have-tos. And this one crooked way of thinking is the root cause of so many different flavors of misery. See, when you point that must at yourself, I must do well, you create anxiety and depression. When you point it at other people, you must treat me fairly, you create rage and resentment. And when you point it at the world itself, the world must be easy and fair, you create self-pity and procrastination. It's the same faulty engine driving all of it. Okay, so that's the theory, but knowing is only half the battle, right? How do we actually put this into practice? How can we start to catch ourselves in the act and actually make a change? Let's walk through a super simple mental exercise you can do anytime, anywhere. Okay, step 1. Picture something you're worried about. Let's say losing your job. Step 2. Tune in to the feeling. Is it a healthy sense of concern, the kind that might motivate you to, say, polish up your resume, or is it that gut-wrenching, paralyzing, unhealthy panic? Step 3, if it's panic, go on a hunt for the thought behind it. I guarantee you'll almost always find a rigid must hiding in there, a silent belief that says, I absolutely must not lose this job. And that, right there, is the core message. You have the power to observe your own mind, to spot these tyrannical demands, and to consciously, deliberately rewrite them as strong preferences instead. Now, it's not magic, it's a skill, and it takes practice. But the choice, ultimately, is yours. The power is in your hands. So, what are you going to choose to feel? Thanks for joining us.